Isolation in a toxic family does not always begin when you leave. Sometimes it begins while you are still living with them, eating in the same house, and carrying the same last name. On the outside, it may look like you are part of the family, but emotionally, you already know that something is wrong. You are related to them, but somehow you are treated like an outsider. This is why toxic family isolation can be so confusing. In today's video, I will be discussing the 3 stages of toxic family isolation. This is based on me as a survivor of family scapegoat abuse. The first stage is imposed isolation. This is the stage where the family isolates you before you even realize you are being isolated. You may not have the language for it yet. You may not know words like scapegoat, black sheep, dysfunction, emotional neglect, or family roles. All you know is that your emotional needs do not matter the way other people's needs matter. Your needs are treated like an inconvenience. Your opinion is dismissed before it is understood. Your presence is tolerated, but your humanity is not fully acknowledged. The family may still claim you as one of them, but their behavior sends a different message. Their behavior says you are not fully included, not fully protected, and not fully valued. Imposed isolation happens when the family neglects your emotional and physical needs while pretending that nothing unusual is happening. Emotionally, this can look like constant invalidation, over-criticism, or no apologies for being harmed. Physically, it can look like physical abuse, exclusion from family meetings, decisions, events, or practical support that is easily given to other family members. One of the clearest signs of imposed isolation is exclusion. In a healthy family, important conversations are not used as weapons. People are not secretly left out in ways that make them feel powerless or invisible. But in a toxic family, the scapegoated person may be the last to know things that affect them. Decisions may be made around them instead of with them. Meetings may happen without them. Family events may be planned in a way that makes them feel unwanted. Information may be withheld, not because it was forgotten, but because leaving them out gives the family a sense of control. This kind of exclusion teaches the person that they are not seen as an equal member of the family system. Favoritism also plays a major role in imposed isolation. It may show up through gifts, compliments, attention, praise, protection, opportunities, or emotional tenderness that are given to others but withheld from you. The painful part is not always the gift itself. It is the message behind the pattern. The message says other people are more special than you. Meanwhile, you may be expected to accept less and still act grateful. You may be expected to watch other family members receive warmth while you are given criticism, silence, or indifference. Over time, favoritism does more than hurt your feelings. It teaches you where you stand. Over-criticism is another form of emotional isolation because it separates you from your sense of worth. In a toxic family, the scapegoated person is often corrected more than they are encouraged. Their mistakes are exaggerated. Their progress is minimized. Their wins are forgotten. Their personality is treated like a problem to be fixed. This kind of criticism does not help a person grow. It keeps them small. It makes them anxious, defensive, and hyper-aware of how they are being perceived. Instead of feeling safe enough to develop an identity, they learn to monitor themselves constantly because any expression of self can become evidence against them. Invalidation deepens the isolation because it teaches you not to trust your own experience. When you establish boundaries, they say you are too sensitive. When you point out unfair treatment, They gaslight you into thinking it does not exist. When you react to disrespect, they focus on your reaction instead of the behavior that caused it. This is how the toxic family protects itself from being accountable. It does not have to change if it can convince you that your perception is the issue. The more they invalidate you, the more alone you become inside your own reality. Another part of imposed isolation is the loss of autonomy. You are not allowed to be a full person with your own preferences, boundaries, opinions, and direction. You are expected to function like a tool in the family system. You are expected to stay quiet when mistreated, perform when needed, and disappear when your presence becomes inconvenient. This becomes even more damaging when basic needs are involved. In some toxic families, one child or family member may miss out on food, shelter, clothing, or education, while other family members receive those things more consistently. It is almost as if you have different living standards, yet you live in the same home. The issue is not only material neglect, it is also the emotional message that comes with it. When the family provides for others but fails to provide for you, the wound becomes deeper because it shows that the lack was not always about inability. It was about priority. The family had the capacity to care, but your needs were not treated as important enough. This is why imposed isolation is so harmful. It does not always look like being locked out of the house. It looks like being surrounded by people who know how to care when they want to, but somehow do not extend that care to you. And because society preaches that family is everything, the person often spends years trying to explain it away. They may tell themselves the family is stressed, busy, traditional, strict, misunderstood, or just bad at expressing love. But at some point, the pattern becomes too consistent to ignore. The second stage is protective isolation. This stage usually begins after a major conflict, betrayal, humiliation, confrontation, or moment of realization. Something happens that makes the wound impossible to deny. Maybe the family crosses a line. Maybe they twist the story so completely that you realize they are not interested in fairness. Whatever the event is, it becomes a breaking point. You may not fully understand the family system yet, but you know you cannot keep exposing yourself to the same treatment in the same way. Protective isolation is when you begin to pull away to survive. This can look like no contact or low contact while still living under the same roof. You may lock yourself in your room, avoid unnecessary conversations, stop attending family meals, stay away from certain gatherings, or keep your interactions brief and guarded. For those that do not live together with the toxic family, this stage is complicated because physical distance does not automatically create emotional freedom. You can leave the house and still carry the family inside your mind. You can stop answering calls and still wait for an apology. You can avoid family gatherings and still replay every conversation. You can know they hurt you and still want an apology. That is what makes protective isolation different from true liberation. In this stage, there is often still resentment, grief, anger, confusion, and a deep need for acknowledgement. The wound is fresh, and the person is not only trying to escape the environment, they are also trying to make sense of how people who were supposed to love them could treat them that way. For people who are still living with the family, protective isolation can be even more difficult. It may look like eating separately, avoiding the living room, staying in the bedroom, using headphones, staying out longer, spending more time with friends, or creating small pockets of safety wherever possible. The person may be accused of being immature by the family, but in reality, they are trying to prevent more damage. When a home is emotionally unsafe, withdrawal can become a survival strategy. It is not ideal, but sometimes it is the only form of control available to someone who does not yet have the resources to leave. Sometimes protective isolation can also mean going to stay with a friend, a relative, a partner, or anyone who feels safer than the family system. This can be a temporary escape, but it can also reveal how serious the situation is. When someone would rather stay somewhere unfamiliar than remain in their own family home, that usually says something about the emotional climate they are trying to survive in. Toxic families often minimize this. Communication may also become indirect during this stage. Instead of speaking directly to the people who harm them, the black sheep may communicate through a relative, a friend, or another family member. This is done to reduce conflict. The family may use this as proof that the person is avoiding responsibility, but often the opposite is true. The person is trying to communicate without being dragged back into the same toxic cycle of denial, blame, and emotional manipulation. The most important part of protective isolation is the decision that has to be made. At this stage, the person must decide whether they are going to keep operating inside the family system with the hope that the family will finally change, or whether they are going to accept that the family is unhealthy and they need to plan an escape and go no contact or low contact when they gain their freedom. This is one of the hardest turning points because it requires the person to give up the fantasy that the right explanation, the right achievement, the right sacrifice, or the right emotional breakdown will finally make the family understand. It forces them to ask whether they are dealing with people who are confused or people who benefit from not understanding. This decision is not simple for people who are still dependent on the family system. Some black sheep are dependent because the same system that neglected them also weaken their ability to become independent. If a family fails to support your development, denies your needs, sabotages your confidence, controls your resources, or withholds guidance while providing it to others, independence can become much harder to reach. Then, when you struggle, the family may use that struggle as proof that you are the problem. This is one of the cruelest parts of the cycle. This protective isolation phase can happen more than once. It often means they are still emotionally attached, financially dependent, socially pressured, or psychologically conditioned to believe that family must eventually become safe if they try hard enough. Toxic families often rely on this hope. They know the person needs to survive or look normal, so they offer small signs of normalcy without real accountability. Then, once the person returns, the old pattern slowly begins again. In protective isolation, the toxic family may still have emotional power because the person is still waiting for something from them. They may be waiting for truth, remorse, change, fairness, tenderness, or recognition. That waiting can keep the emotional bond alive even when physical contact is limited. This does not mean the person should shame themselves for wanting those things, but healing requires recognizing when that desire becomes the chain that keeps you connected to people who have repeatedly shown that they are not willing to be honest. The third stage is liberated isolation. This is the stage where distance is no longer only a reaction to pain. It becomes a conscious expression of self-respect, clarity, and emotional independence. At this stage, the person is not merely hiding from the family, avoiding conflict, or waiting for the family to change. They have accepted the pattern. They understand what the family is capable of, what the family is not willing to face, and what continued access will cost them. This does not mean they feel nothing. It means their choices are no longer controlled by guilt, fear, obligation, false hope, or the need to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding them. Liberated isolation is not the same as bitterness. It is not spending every day trying to punish the family. It is not trying to prove that you are better than them. It is not building an identity around hatred. True emotional freedom is quieter than that. It is the moment you stop needing them to agree with your reality before you trust it. It is the moment you stop presenting evidence to people who already know what they did but benefit from denying it. It is the moment you stop confusing their lack of accountability with your lack of value. At this stage, the person has control over both physical access and emotional access. Physical access means they decide whether the family can call, visit, message, demand, interrupt, or enter their life. Emotional access means they decide how much mental space the family gets inside them. A person can be no contact and still give the family emotional access every day through rumination, guilt, fantasy arguments, and the hope of being vindicated. A person can be low contact and still be emotionally free if they no longer allow the family's moods, opinions, accusations, or approval to define their inner world. The real freedom is not only in the distance, it is in the loss of control the family once had over the person's nervous system, identity, and decisions. They no longer need the people who harm them to be the same people who validate the harm. This is a major shift. In the earlier stages, the person may still believe that healing depends on the family admitting the truth. In this final stage, they understand that the truth can be real even if the family denies it forever. Their pain can be valid without an apology. Their memory can be accurate without a confession. Their boundaries can be necessary without the family's permission. This stage also involves accepting that some toxic families do not change because the current system works for them. If scapegoating you protects the image of the family, they may continue doing it. If invalidating you protects them from shame, they may continue doing it. If blaming you keeps attention away from the dysfunction, they may continue doing it. If controlling you makes them feel powerful, they may continue doing it. Liberated isolation means you stop building your life around the fantasy that people will abandon a system that benefits them just because it harms you. In this stage, the person also stops performing for validation. They no longer believe that one more achievement, one more explanation, one more sacrifice, one more calm conversation, or one more act of loyalty will finally unlock the love they were denied. This is important because many black sheep spend years trying to become undeniable. They try to be successful enough, kind enough, useful enough, forgiving enough, quiet enough, or impressive enough to force the family to reconsider their treatment. But toxic families often do not respond to growth with love. Sometimes they respond with jealousy or invalidation. When the person sees this clearly, they stop trying to earn acceptance from people invested in their inferiority. Liberated isolation also means the person no longer confuses contact with connection. Many toxic families use physical presence as proof of love while offering no emotional safety inside that presence. They want you at the dinner, but not in the truth. They want you at the event, but not with boundaries. They want you in the family photo, but not in the family decisions. At this stage, the person understands that being around people is not the same as being loved by them.